Hello, BookTube. Well, today's the day. The short list for the most controversial long list for the Man Booker Prize in recent memory was announced today, and I thought we'd go through it and have a little chatty poo. The 6 books on the short list are The Overstory by Richard Powers, Milkman by Anna Burns, Washington Black by Essie Edgigan, Everything Under by Daisy Johnson, The Mars Room by Rachel Kushner, and The Long Take by Robin Robertson. I've already seen a couple of reaction videos on BookTube, and they've been wonderful. Karl Anderson did a great video that you should all watch. I'll link it down below. And also, Waterstone's a former BookTuber did a great video on it, and I'll link them both. There's lots of food for thought. My first reaction to this shortlist was that somehow the Man Booker judging panel managed to carve out an actually interesting short list out of a long list that mostly infuriated me. I don't know quite how that happened. In the time since we last talked about the Man Booker Prize, I have read all of these books. So there are no unknowns on the list for me. There were quite a few that I'd already read. And now I've filled in those gaps. And this is when the real prize handicapping begins. The long list is for shock value. The short list is when you start to actually handicap who might win. And there are all sorts of variables going on here. Like, for instance, as has been mentioned in other videos, will the Man Booker want to give this prize to an American again? I tend to think not, but then again, I don't really know. This prize panel is unpredictable to me. And also there's the Panglossian idea that maybe they would just operate on literary measures and wouldn't care whether or not it went to an American 10 times in a row if the book was good. The list itself, the books on the list itself are it's uneven, but interestingly so. For instance, there are still 2 debuts. 2 debuts made it all the way to the short list out of 4. Everything Under by Daisy Johnson and The Long Take by Robin Robertson are both debut works. And if you remember my whinging and complaining earlier video about the long list, I said that if the philosophy that seems to be embodied in the long list holds true, then a debut will win. The judges will give the prize to a debut and will have decided to do so long before they ever came to a short list. Will on the Waterstone's blog makes a very good point, which is that the judges technically, at least on paper, have to read these books many times, and that therefore the shortlist and maybe the winner will be freighted towards books that survive a rereading well. That's a very good point. Unless the fix was in from the beginning. Unless the judging panel was going to say, look, this isn't our grandfather's Man Booker anymore. We're going to send a clear message. We're going to nominate a comic book. We're going to nominate 4 debut works of fiction, and we're going to give it to a debut work of fiction. If that's true, then if the winner is, by those tea leaves, going to be either Everything Under by Daisy Johnson or The Long Take by Robin Robertson, The Long Take is about an American, but more importantly, it's by a man. So if that tea leaf reading holds true, then the winner will be Everything Under by Daisy Johnson, who I think is also the youngest person who's ever been nominated for a Booker Prize. So that would be a whole basket full of things, of boxes to check, none of which are literary. So I'm hoping that doesn't happen. I think of the books out of these 6, I think, despite the problems that I have with it, I think the most ambitious, the most beautiful, the most impressive book on this list is The Overstory by Richard Powers. I don't still quite know what to make of some of the hares that it chases, but I think it towers over the rest of the books on this list and is the clear winner if that's the rationale we're going for. But then you'd be giving it to a cis white male and to an American. I don't know. I don't know to what extent box checking and hashtagging has anything to do with this prize. If those things are in the ascendant, if they are ruling as they are starting to rule every other aspect of all of our lives, then there's no chance that Richard Powers will win. But I didn't expect him to be on the short list, so... and I can't help but notice on all the UK videos that the UK edition of the short list of the Overstory is so much nicer looking than the American version. But anyway, the biggest surprise for me out of these 6 books in the interval between my last video on the Man Booker and this one, is Washington Black, which I thought was extremely good. I've heard it called a well-written adventure story. In fact, a couple of the reaction videos and pieces that I've read have called it that. I thought there was a lot more going on there than that. But then again, Moby Dick was also called a well-written adventure story, and posterity found quite a bit going on in there. So I don't know one way or another. Washington Black gives me a very good vibe. If there were no box ticking going on, if there were no hashtagging going on, if nothing about this prize was on message instead of about literature, I might think that Washington Black would win, despite the fact that I believe S.A. Edgecombe is American. I think she is, one way or another. It has the feel of it. It has the feel of something that will break out and win. Whereas if you give the Booker Prize to Richard Powers, you are lauding an already incredibly lauded author, and that doesn't seem to be the rationale for the judging panel this time around, to want to do something like that. So, but one way or another, I like the fact that this list has been carved out of a longer list that largely disappointed me. This one feels unpredictable. It feels interesting. I lamented in my earlier video that people might take the long list seriously, so to speak, and go and immediately read all of those books, several of which do not deserve it, do not deserve your extremely hard-won reading time. But I could easily get behind people wanting to read all of these 6 books, even though the Mars Room I thought was awful. I find it hard to believe that anybody going into that book with an open mind, instead of saying, I already like Rachel Kushner and there's nothing you can do about it. If somebody goes into that book with an open mind, or with the title and author taken off it, I find it hard to believe they wouldn't see the gaping flaws all the way through it. But maybe not. One way or another, The Long Take is sort of a prose poem, a quasi-noir prose poem. I thought there were parts of it that were incredibly structurally adventurous. It's, I think, very heavy-handed, but that's to be expected in a debut work. That's also true of Everything Under by Daisy Johnson. They're both incredibly heavy-handed. They both telegraph. They don't trust their readers, because trusting your readers is a skill that you develop over time. Most debut novelists don't have it. And that leaves Milkman by Anna Burns, which could also win. That also has a vibe of winning. I think it... in the present era, I think it's unthinkable that the prize will go to a man this time around. Which, if true, if I'm right about that, I shouldn't be right about that, but that would bring the running down here to Milkman by Anna Burns, Washington Black, and Everything Under, the debut. And although, as everybody has pointed out, it's extremely hazardous to predict the Man Booker, I am going to say that the winner, which I think is announced next month or later next month, I predict that the winner will be one of those 3. I don't think I'm willing to narrow things down any more than that, but I think the winner will be either Milkman, Washington Black, or Everything Under. And of those 3, my own personal choice would be Washington Black to win. I think that would be just thrilling, just amazing. So, but one way or another, aside from maybe the Mars Room, I don't know what it's doing on this list. Maybe the judges see something in it that it was completely hidden to me. But one way or another, I'm pleased with this long list. I think it recovers a lot of ground that was lost to the virtue signaling and the hey, look at us nature of the long list. So that's good. I actually needed that little shot in the arm after the National Book Award. I actually needed that. So there you go. That is a long list. I'll put all the annotations down below. I'll link to a couple of videos that I really liked. I'm hoping to see more videos from other booktubers who are interested in prizes. Of course, none of this is ultimately any more important than anything else. There are plenty of booktubers out there who are just completely blissfully rereading a favorite book of theirs from 1970. They couldn't care less about new releases or big prizes, and that's just fine too. I'm looking forward to those videos as well. But in the meantime, I'm gonna go check at the door. But I'll be back soon. Thank you, BookTube.